He sold a gin company for $600 million. He sold a phone company for over $300 million. He bought a Welsh football club for $2.6 million and turned it into a $400 million asset. And yesterday he put on a costume and begged Marvel for a job. That's not desperation. That's the most calculated move he's made in the last 5 years. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. Most people think Ryan Reynolds became rich from Deadpool. That's wrong. He became rich because Deadpool almost never happened. And understanding why it almost didn't happen tells you everything about how he actually thinks. Rewind to 2009. X-Men Origins Wolverine. Reynolds plays the first version of Deadpool. They sew his mouth shut on screen. His mouth shut. For a character whose entire identity is that he never stops talking, fans didn't just dislike it. They were furious. Reynolds was furious. 2 years later, it got worse. Green Lantern, 2011. $200 million budget. $116 million at the box office. One of the biggest superhero flops ever recorded. For the next 3 years, no major studio trusted him, with a blockbuster lead again. That's the part of the story people skip. Here's the decision that built the entire empire. He spent years trying to get a real Deadpool movie made. The full character, his version, his way. Studios said no, repeatedly. Too violent, too weird, too risky. Then in 2014, test footage leaked online. Nobody knows exactly how. Fans went completely insane. The pressure became impossible to ignore. The studio greenlit the film. But here's the detail that almost never gets reported. Reynolds barely got paid for the first Deadpool. He voluntarily gave up a significant portion of his own salary just to get the movie made. Think about that decision for 1 second. You've already had 2 major failures. Your career is being questioned publicly, and you're choosing to work for less than your market rate on a risky R-rated superhero film that every studio passed on because you believe in it that much. That's not an actor's, that's an investor's decision, and the return was insane. Deadpool opened in 2016. It broke every R-rated box office record in history because he'd taken almost nothing up front. His back-end percentage kicked in after the movie crossed its break-even point. Some estimates put his personal earnings from that first film alone, once the dust settled, well past $20 million. Reynolds is now one of the most bankable actors on the planet. He buys a stake in a gin company. Not a famous gin company, not a premium established brand. Aviation Gin, a small craft distillery most people in the spirits industry had never heard of. He doesn't just endorse it. He becomes the face, the owner. He runs the marketing himself. His style, self-aware, absurdist, slightly chaotic, becomes the entire brand identity. 2 years later, Diageo, one of the largest drinks companies on the planet, comes knocking. They buy Aviation Gin in a deal worth up to $610 million. His personal cut from that deal that he owned for 2 years. Let that number sit for a second. $100 million from Gin in 2 years. His biggest Deadpool paycheck was never close to that number, not even combined across both films. But he wasn't done. While the Gin deal was still being processed, Reynolds was already moving on something else. Mint Mobile, a budget cell phone company. He co-owned roughly a quarter of it. Not a luxury brand, not something glamorous. A discount phone carrier, targeting people who thought their phone bill was too high. He ran the same playbook. Face of the company, marketing that felt like it was written by someone who found the whole thing slightly ridiculous, which he did. 2023, T-Mobile acquires Mint Mobile for $135. Reynolds personally walked away with more than $300 million in cash and stock combined. $300 million from a budget phone company. At this point, the math becomes almost absurd. Gin, $100 million plus. Phone company, $300 million plus. Total from non-acting businesses, $400 million. 2021. Reynolds and his friend Rob McElhenney buy a football club in Wales. A club in the 5th tier of English football, in a town most people outside Wales couldn't find on a map. Purchase price, $2.6 million. They make a documentary about it. The club gets promoted multiple times. The story goes global. 4 years later, they sell a minority stake at a valuation of over $400 million. $2.6 million in, $400 million valuation out. That is not a good investment. That is one of the best celebrity investments of the entire decade by any measurable financial metric. And it happened because Reynolds understood something most investors miss entirely. The story around an asset can be worth more than the asset itself. Wrexham's valuation didn't come from football. It came from the documentary. The emotional connection, the global attention. He didn't buy a football club. He bought a content franchise. Stack everything together and here's where it lands. Aviation Gin sold for up to $610 deal. Mint Mobile sold for $135B, his cut $300 plus. Wrexham, valued at $400 and rising. Alpine F1, a stake in a Formula One team at a moment when F1's U.S. audience is growing faster than any other sport. Total net worth estimate $350 million. Currently fifth among the wealthiest actors alive. Behind him, Hugh Jackman, his own on-screen rival, sitting at less than half of what Reynolds has built. And his garage? A Lamborghini Aventador because every list needs one, parked next to a Tesla, a Prius. Which brings us back to Comic-Con. Hall H yesterday. Reynolds walks out in a gray Deadpool costume, calls himself Ricky, grabs the microphone, asks Paul Rudd where Thor is and why he's been crying. A callback to the last scene. Anyone saw Deadpool on screen. The crowd loses it. But here's what was actually happening. His name was missing from the official Avengers Doomsday cast reveal. Fans were panicking online. Speculation was flooding social media. A normal actor releases a statement, or stays quiet and lets the studio handle it. Reynolds put on a costume and turned fan anxiety into a punchline. He didn't need the confirmation. He created so much attention around the question that the confirmation almost doesn't matter. There's reportedly a fourth Deadpool film, already in early development. Ghost Rider conversations are real, but even if none of it happened, the brand just got $100 million worth of free coverage from a 2-minute costume appearance. That's not an actor begging for work. That's a $350 million brand, wearing a mask working exactly as designed. The lesson isn't that Ryan Reynolds got lucky. The lesson is that every time Hollywood told him no, he found a different door. And he bought it. Next video, I'm covering the actor, who turned down more money than Reynolds ever made and ended up richer than him anyway. You won't guess who it is.